There is a lot of scope of bringing change into the world by becoming an Indian Audit and Accounts Service officer. Every service has its own unique style of what can be done about the people. Each service is important and each service matters to the nation. On the job training part, again, it is split into two parts. One is first we are trained with the audit department for 4 months. Then we go back to the academy for a 2 weeks debriefing. And then we come back to the field for again 4 months of accounts training, and then we finish it off with I think 6 weeks of training in Shimla along with 1 week of foreign tour. In Audit Office, like I said, we are being told about how the audit is done, how do we plan an audit, what all entities come in the Rajasthan office, for example, how do we constitute an audit team, how do you talk to head of departments in different in the state machinery. So for example, what is the equivalent? So for example, a DAG is a deputy accountant general, the level at which an IAAS officer joins the service. He or she is equivalent to a secretary level officer in the state machinery, who is generally an IAS officer of 8 to 10 years of service minimum. So IAAS generally is in equivalence also, it ranks much higher as compared to the counterparts in other services. So this is, I think, an only exception which is not available to other services. तो accounts में वो आपको बताते हैं कि what is the interaction between the treasury, which is maintained by the administration, the state administration, and what is the how it all comes together into the accounts of the state government, which is ultimately maintained by the Accountant General Office. How are the accounts checked multiple times? If there is any problem, then how does the accounting and treatment is done for the same? How does whenever there is an embezzlement of funds, whenever there is a correction needs to be made in the accounts, who the responsibility is fixed on whom? How is the correction made? Whenever an audit report or an accounts report comes out, which committee in the parliament? So the entire functioning of the CAG ultimately is handed over, like the reports are handed over to the legislature, which ultimately takes action on or recommends action on executive about whatever is there in the reports of the IAAS of the CAG. After all this happens, we go back to the academy and we undertake a debriefing course in which we are supposed to tell them whatever we learned on the field, how we got the exposure, how is our understanding better as compared to when we were in the academy and when we have come back from the field. Last May we have a 1 week of foreign tour. In my batch, the tour happened in New York. We were attached with the UN office and we did a training with the UN office there and came back and again joined office. So I was there with my batch till the time the foreign tour started, and after that I left and joined the IAS. But from this point, it's another very interesting part that I want to tell the people about, that Indian Audit and Accounts Service also does a very important job of conducting audits of different multilateral agencies of the UN and allied agencies. For example, the CAG of India is the designated auditor for the United Nations for 6 years. I think it ended in 2021, if I'm not wrong. I'm not sure, 2021. So anyway, for 6 years we were the designated auditor for the United Nations. We audit, different audits are conducted. So right now we are the designated auditors for the FAO in Rome. We are the designated auditors for the, I think, Atomic Agency also in Vienna, if I'm not wrong, and a couple of other multilateral agencies also. We have 3 designated offices in Kuala Lumpur, London and Washington, which are permanent offices like of the CAG located abroad. So I think apart from except the foreign service, I think after the foreign service, Indian Audit and Account Service is the only service which gives you so much exposure of the foreign environment. Like you get to visit countries outside India the most in Audit and Account Service after foreign service. So that is another great exposure which you get from this service, which is not possible in any other service for that matter. Thirdly, there is also great aspect of equivalence in terms of empanelment as joint secretaries, additional secretaries to the Government of India, which is a routine process of the Government of India, and IAS and IAAS have that equivalence set up since many years. So not many services, unfortunately, are put at an equal position in terms of how many years it has to take for an officer of, let's say, a postal service officer to become a joint secretary, or an Indian Audit and Accounts Service to become a joint secretary to Government of India. But that equivalence is maintained in Audit and Accounts and with the IAS. Apart from that, infrastructure-wise, I think IAAS is, I think in my personal opinion, the infrastructure is even better than IAS officers for most positions in the Audit and Account Service. Like in Jaipur, the colony that the IAAS colony is, I think, one of the best maintained colonies in the entire country. Like I have seen a lot of housing societies for officers around the country, but I think that just steps out to be one of the best that I have seen. So what I am trying to tell all of you here is that there is a lot of scope of bringing change into the world by becoming an Indian Audit and Account Service officer, and the only thing that is needed there is the conviction, and there has to be a plan as to how you want to do it. So every service, like I started with, every service has its own unique style of what can be done about the people, for the people, what can be done about whatever you wanted to achieve through that service. So I know a lot of IRS officers who are doing great work in the field. I know a lot of audit and accounts people who are doing amazing work by, just by even not going beyond what they are tasked to do, just by doing what they are doing. Like, so it is very important for all of us to understand that each service carries its own importance, and that importance has to be understood and taken pride in. So the general mentality that people have, that there are only 2-3 important services and rest all services are not that important, is absolutely a thought which needs to be corrected. It needs to be understood very well that every service has its own importance, every service has its own line of work, and every service, if the job is performed to the best of the person's ability, will end up bringing a definite change in the lives of the people. So that thought needs to be very clear even before you enter the service, so that after you enter the service, you are able to discharge your duties to the best of your abilities, rather than always wondering about alternatives available to you. So it is very, very important to understand that each service is important and each service matters to the nation.